Coming up on Sunday, don't forget, 2 o'clock, we will be live on YouTube talking about the Super Bowl and what other good rumors pop up. We'll be doing that.
Love myself some rumor mongering.
And some YouTube streaming. Like the YouTube channel. We appreciate, or like the video, subscribe to the channel.
Yep, that's Guy. I'm John. Podcast below in the description. Subscribe to that as well.
More to gain in the Super Bowl, John. Mahomes, Brady. What do you think?
Brady has nothing else to gain. Like his legacy, he's been to 10 Super Bowls. He's already won 6. So win or lose, he'd be 6 of 10. That'd be 60%. It'd be one thing, crazy. Like 60%. Like no one's going to even have the opportunity to be 60% again on a Super Bowl, right? I mean, it's just he's in his own little world, his own little class. I saw an ESPN ticker the other day that was like Brady becomes the first guy to play in double-digit championship games like Super Bowls, finals, whatever, and have multiple MVPs. And the other list was like Bill Russell. It's like it's
111.
Like even Mahomes. Like how's Mahomes getting to 10? If Mahomes gets to like 6, I mean, this guy's gonna go. He already is, but he's gonna go down as like an all-time. He might just be we might have a conversation one day like, was he better than Brady? Who knows?
I don't know. Twitter tells me Deshaun is just as good or better than Mahomes.
Yeah, Twitter says a lot of things.
Actually, only 17% of respondents.
Get
ready for the YouTube comments to blow up on that comment, Middlecoff.
The where you're vaulted as a 2-time Super Bowl winning coach and quarterback to me is much different than where you're vaulted as a 7-time Super Bowl winner, right? Now you could argue for Bruce Arians, but I don't really view Bruce Arians like this is Brady. Without Brady, to me, this is a playoff team, maybe like one and done.
Yeah.
So I view it's like Brady versus. I think Andy and Mahomes have a lot on the line. And really they're going to be synonymous until maybe one day Andy retires in like, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years. And then Mahomes has that, second half of his career. But as of right now, like they're together. I was watching in my boredom, the NFL Network was playing the AFC Championship game from 2018.
Mm-hmm.
What a game. I mean, the game was incredible. And you're just watching it and you're going like, looking back, what an incredible performance he's playing the Patriots in the peak of their dynasty, right? It's just like it'd be like that was like the 98 Bulls. Like they've already got 5 Super Bowls. They've been to countless Super Bowl other appearances. They've been to like at that time 7 straight or 8 straight AFC Championship. They are throwing Flores. Remember, Patricia had already left, so Flores was his defensive coordinator. Their defense is stacked with like Gilmore's and J.C. Jackson's and Hightowers, and they got Claiborne, and Mahomes is getting peppered and making these incredible throws. I'm like, this 22-year-old kid is going toe-to-toe with the equivalent of the 98 Bulls and just like taking lick after lick after lick, and they take the lead late. I was like, this is one of the greatest performances that probably doesn't get talked about enough. And looking back, if he was a stock at the time, you would have been like, and I think we did talk about it, but there's still some unknown. Like it's so hard to get back. You never know. You could see when they lost, like the look on Andy's face, like that was a devastating to lose the AFC Championship game at home. But guy, they have quadrupled, tenfold their stock since, right? Back-to-back Super Bowls, they won it.
They came back to the AFC Championship game twice since then.
Tommy left, so now they own the AFC. Like they are now the Patriots. It's their stock was at $350 at Amazon, and now it's at like $1,500. And you go, of course it was, because this guy's elite. But part of being an all-time great player, you're not guaranteed championships. I was listening to Hasselback with Russillo, and he was a practice squad quarterback on the Favre teams that like went to a Super Bowl. And when Andy was the quarterback coach, and he was like, God, you just knew how special Andy was. And he talked about like, I'm in there with Brett Favre. He's like the apple of everyone's eye in the league. And you just look back, you're like, he won 3 straight MVPs. They got to back-to-back Super Bowls. He never got back to another Super Bowl after that, and he only won 1.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time with like Rodgers and Russell. Like there's a chance like Rodgers and Russell, for example, those two guys, both are going to be – Rodgers is going to go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. Okay, he might never make it back to another Super Bowl. You could argue these last 2 years might be the closest he ever gets back, right, to even getting that close. And you just never know. Now, I would think it's fair to say, like, maybe Mahomes is just better than everybody, and he probably is. Like, watching that game, you're like, God, he was way better than anyone. Tom wasn't this good at this. Peyton Manning wasn't this good at this age.
Russell was not that good.
Fuck no. Rodgers, remember, he was immediately good, but he had waited forever.
Yep.
Like, this guy had just waited 1 year.
Well,
and he was just – I just think that those guys can jolt themselves and vault themselves. like Andy's already a Hall of Famer now, but you just become like, are you a first ballot guy? Like has just multiple time Super Bowl, you're however many wins. And here's the other thing. They win this, I think we would start tangibly going, could they win like 4, right? In like 7 years? Could they win 3 straight? Would they be the heavy betting favorite going into next year? They might be anyway, but
Even if they lose the game, they might be the favorite going into the next year, depending on how the game looks, right?
would you be picking them to win 3 straight if they win it?
Yeah.
Yeah, why
I mean,
wouldn't
just if you're going to pick somebody, absolutely. I mean, now the one area I disagree a little bit is I do think Tom has something to gain, and to me, it's just kind of, as I said it on a previous podcast, separating himself from Bill a little bit. You know what I mean? Like if he goes,
that is a little barroom talk though, right? Because Bill's a first.
yeah, but I mean,
Hall
what
of
is
Fame.
anything really? Any of this? I mean, in terms of like, I think
There are
Tom.
hierarchies in the Hall of Fame, right? Like Tom can't get any higher with his own peers.
Yeah, but part of this is like what comes after you, right? Like Russell won 11. MJ comes along, wins. I mean, basketball's almost a little bit different because we.
But how is anyone getting to 10 Super Bowls ever again?
Yeah, I mean, how did this guy do it? I'm with you. It's just part of this is just building up for 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 30 years from now. I think it all, like we say that all the time, and then it always seems to come back, and there's a conversation.
I would say the difference though is, if Andy Reid right now is 55 instead of 63, I think we would talk like, God, could these guys be together for 15 years? He is in his early 60s, right?
That's true.
Part of Tom and Bill, they got together when Bill was like 50 years old or 52 or whatever, right? They had 20 years together, and Bill's still coaching now. Like Andy won't be coaching when Pat retires, if he retires at 40, more than likely. He'd be like 80, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that there's an element there of, if I just told you Andy Reid, if he was a little younger, I think we would say this would have the possibility. But there is a finite probably date on his coaching life with Pat, and then there would be a turnover.
Yeah.
With Pat's new coach.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think you can ever win so many championships that another one doesn't add something to your. That's my point on Tom.
I'm not trying to diminish, like if Tom wins, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I just think the other two.
No,
guys
I know you're not. And I agree with that. That's my one nitpick was I do think it does mean something for Tom. Now here's the thing for Mahomes. If they win, that's 2 championships. How many guys right now? I mean, here's the list of guys with 2 Super Bowl champion quarterbacks: Eli Manning, Jim Plunkett, Bart Starr, Ben Roethlisberger, Bob Greasy, Troy Aikman has 3, Roger Staubach 2 in 4 appearances, Peyton 2 in 4, Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw. Joe's got 4, Terry's got 4, Elway has 2, and Brady's won 6. Like, is he gonna start? Are we gonna already be talking about him as he's better than, like, his career is ahead of, like, he's ahead of Roethlisberger all time? Yes. Is he ahead of Eli all time? Yes. Is he gonna start moving ahead of Peyton soon?
Well, who do you think most people would rank higher, Elway or Peyton? Probably depends how old you are.
That's
you could
tough.
say you could say they're kind of like equals.
Yeah,
right?
I think maybe this is just because he's more recent. I think Peyton gets talked about like he's higher on the list than Elway, but
yeah, and weird they're kind of connected, right? Because they went to 2 Super Bowls together, in a weird way as the GM,
and also I think the way they're really connected is they lost Super Bowls before part of the winning was it was the end of their careers, and it was like they got to do this to get the credit that they deserve. And
I think if you really wanted to nitpick Elway, like in his peak, like when he was Mahomes, peak Favre, he couldn't win. And then at the end, I mean, Terrell Davis had like a 5-year career. He got into the Hall of Fame because he kind of helped carry them to it. Because John, like, we did this for John. Part of it is you look over and John's like 38 years old.
Right.
But he's doing the helicopter. But regardless, I think Mahomes would be on a trajectory to be like knocking everyone off the list. And he would just be, the conversation would be, he would be on a fast track to be like, I'm chasing Tom. Like,
I'll tell you, can I jump in there?
Elway and Peyton move out of the way.
I think what it would become is right now Tom is clearly number 1. But also there's clearly number 2, and that's Montana. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that is what then Mahomes starts targeting as that becomes a conversation. Like
he'd be 2 for 2.
Montana was just the GOAT, and then Brady passed him and became the GOAT. And then it's like, well, okay, I don't think we ever really considered that Joe would not end up at number 2. Now, again, we start talking about quarterback talent. That's a different conversation. We're just talking about the GOAT, the winners, the biggest games, the biggest moments, the coolest guys. Like, that's the other part of it with Tom and Joe. Like, part of what put Joe at the top, Montana, was not just the wins, but it was the story in the huddle. Hey, is that John Candy over there? It was all of this, like, ice water through his veins stuff that came with it. And remember, he started really young.
I also think he was synonymous with Bill Walsh.
Yeah, it was like he was part of a dynasty.
Which Patrick would be part of.
So to me, that is what then becomes the conversation. Is like, is Patrick going to chase down Joe here pretty soon?
Well, I also think this is where Andy comes in. Andy, I think he realized, of course he realized he's got a chance to vault himself into like, how many can we rattle off with this guy? Like, remember when I was just like this really good coach but couldn't win the big one? Now I'm rattling off chips. Like, we would be talking about them. Can they go on a historic Golden State Warriors type? Like, can you rattle off 3 or 4 in 6 years? Because they'd be the favorite every year as long as those two guys are there. That's just the simple reality.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think from a legacy type standpoint, right? Like Terry Bradshaw has 4. There's not really a debate right now who's going to go down as a better quarterback in the NFL, Bradshaw or Mahomes. It's too early for that, but if you really had that conversation, nobody would settle on Bradshaw, right?
I do think the game, no, but I think even with Aikman, I think the game has just dramatically changed. That those guys, and I'm not trying to diminish anything anyone did in like the 70s or 80s or 90s, the game manager standpoint, and like these guys, and that's where I think Peyton started it, and then Brady became that. Now like the Rodgers and the Breezes and the Roethlisbergers, these guys that can just, we'll throw it 50, 60 times a game because that's just the way the game changed. And I think Mahomes can go down as like the greatest version of that, right? He's the Peyton. He's what Brady became the last like 15 years, but Brady's the greatest of that too. It's the weird part. Like Brady's the greatest passer of all time. Like he's won multiple MVPs, throwing 40 to 45 to 50 touchdowns. He became that. And that's, to me, remember, I was thinking about this yesterday. When I was in college, you were in college at the same time. Anyone that's like 35, 36, we were all in college at the same time. The Niners really sucked. And I just became a fan of the league. Peyton was my favorite player. Indy was my favorite. I rooted for Indy. And I remember how devastated I'd always be when they'd lose in the playoffs, because I was like, this guy's fucking sweet. He's throwing like 45, 50 touchdowns. He's just carrying his team. But he'd always get smacked. And I'll never forget how excited I was when he finally won the Super Bowl. Because for a long period of time, it's like, you need a well-balanced team. You need a great defense. You need a good run game. Because that was always like part of the Niners' greatness, even with Joe Montana, was like Ronnie Lott. They had Charles Haley. Like they had all these great defensive players. When they won the Super Bowl with Steve Young, it was like they signed Deion Sanders. They had Bryant Young. They had Dana Stubblefield. They had Ken Norton Jr. They had Tim McDonald, Fresno guy. They had all these dudes, and it was Eric Davis was a really good player. And you had to have well-balanced teams. It kind of became like a sweet, sweet offense with just a solid defense can do it. And I think Mahomes, I think Brady has had some moments like that where that's kind of how the league has gone. I just think that Mahomes can be this kind of unicorn outlier, just can go on this because his stats are going to just be incredible. But when you watch him, you don't like, yeah, he's not really a product of the environment. Because I'm watching that game. This goes back to that AFC Championship game. These guys are fucking peppering him, guy. I mean, he's getting up and he's cheering on it. It was like, this is like old school. If I was like Montana or Bradshaw, they love this guy because they go, this guy could play in our era. Right. He honestly is a throwback. And this is where the Favre comparisons are. Favre was an every era man, right? He could have played in the 60s with leather helmets. He would kill it.
Rodgers. I would say the same about Rodgers.
But I think Brady Manning, it's like, yeah, they would figure it out. Like they would crush it no matter what. Rivers, I think that's why everyone respects him. Like he could have played against like the 70s defense. He would have taken it.
The other thing,
and that's where I think this kid falls under. Where some guys you're like, would Jared Goff have lasted in the 70s? Probably not. No, but again, I'm not saying Jared Goff's on his level, but I think there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL right now that you're like, I don't know if he would have lasted.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is he's got the Denver Broncos tweeted about Steve Atwater the other day. I'm like, I remember Steve Atwater really hitting people. I go to YouTube, Steve Atwater. The Broncos played the Packers in like 97 or 98 or whatever in that game. One of the first plays of the game, Brett Favre throws this long seam route. Atwater might have killed his own teammate, and luckily, like Antonio Freeman, like ducked. I mean, everyone would have died And you just realize, like, God, this wasn't that. This was when we were in like junior high. People got killed. Like, he knocked himself out. The other guy got knocked out. It was just it doesn't even look like that anymore.
Well, remember when we interviewed John Lynch, we showed him some video of himself and said, would this have been targeting? He was like, no. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it would have. The other thing is that Mahomes has his Gronk, right? Tyreek Hill's only 26, and he's one of the best players in the league. And like Gronk, he's a complete mismatch.
Yeah.
And Kittle's not
Travis,
that old.
30
Kelsey's
years
not
old?
that old either. Yeah, 31 or 32.
Yeah.
But 26? Tyreek's 26.
Where I think the difference between Kelsey and Gronk too is Gronk's early years in the era it wasn't like anti-concussion, but I'd say 10, 11, 12, like you were still allowed to kill people. And Gronk used to get that like Shaq treatment.
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time you remember Kelsey getting like depleted or something? They don't. I don't remember Kelsey really being like, God, is Kelsey going to get up? Like, he actually kind of slides. And I would say, unless something freaky happens, it's football. I would say both those guys, it's not inconceivable they stay relatively healthy for the next 3 or 4 years, right?
Yeah.
That's where the pushback would be like, well, it would have been hard to maintain. Like, it wasn't like Kelsey was Mahomes' age, and Mahomes might get a decade with Kelsey, right? Where Kelsey probably, if he would have been playing like 95 to 2005, by 2000, you'd be like, oh, he took this one hit. It took out his knee.
Brent
Like,
Jones.
they don't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because Gronk, when you look at it, really had like a decade career, but part of it was those first like 5 years, he was a battering ram. Then now you don't. That's where this is where the discussion will ever get if Mahomes gets to like 4 or 5 championships. They'll be like, well, he benefited a little bit, and there'll be some truth to that. But I think we all agree he could have played in any era.
But I think, to me, what will be the tiebreaker for him is people will say, well, did you watch him?
Yeah.
Like, did you watch him?
He's got the eye test.
So